Good morning. Thank you for being here, and thank you to all the associates here at Leland. I'm happy to be here today with my colleagues, Minister Scott, Minister Fullerton, and our colleague, local MPP, Raymond Chow, who's also the Minister of Seniors and Accessibility. And I want to thank, first of all, Jocelyn Bamford from the Coalition of Concerned Manufacturers, and we'll hear from her in a little bit, and our host today, Byron Nelson, owner of Leland Industries. Thank you, Byron, for your hospitality. Every single member of our government was elected on a promise to be for the people. And when it comes to the economy, being for the people means keeping and growing good jobs right here in the province. This will not happen on its own. Instead, it starts with cutting unnecessary red tape, much of which was put in place by the previous Liberal government. Red tape that is driving jobs and investment out of our province. We need to create an environment where businesses can grow and create good jobs. We have a real problem in Ontario with the high cost, delays, and lost business associated with burdensome regulations. Businesses across the province are telling us loud and clear that the regulatory burden is getting worse every year. At the same time, many U.S. states are reducing this burden, making them increasingly attractive to Ontario business as a place to invest. This year, for every dollar U.S. businesses invest per worker, Ontario businesses will invest 39 cents. This huge gap points to a painful reality that we need to face. The hard truth about Ontario's economy is this, that after years of Liberal governments that fixated on job regulation instead of job creation, our economic future is no longer secure. There are two schools of thought about how the Liberals viewed the private economy in Ontario. Some people believe that the Liberals were oblivious to the competitive realities facing employers in our province. Others believe that the Liberals were blinded by ideology and just did not care about the barriers to job creation that resulted from their policies. Well, I'm partial to both theories. But one thing that is beyond debate is that Ontario's economy, once a leader in Confederation, is now trailing the pack. Just look at the latest figures on GDP per capita. They show that in 2016, economic output per person in Ontario was 1% below the national average. We're behind British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Newfoundland and Labrador. It's even more shocking when we compare how we're doing with the rest of North America. We've long been accustomed to thinking of Ontario as being in the top league in North America, alongside, say, New York and California. But we've been slipping badly. The latest figures on GDP per capita, also from 2016, compared the 50 U.S. states, District of Columbia, and 13 Canadian provinces and territories. Out of these 64 jurisdictions, New York ranked 3rd, California ranked 9th, and Ontario ranked 46th. We're way down in the bottom third of the ranking, with a GDP per capita similar to Oklahoma's and Montana's. Ontario is no longer the economic engine of Canada. As a result, its GDP per capita ranks in the bottom third among North American jurisdictions. Key factor in Ontario's lagging economy has been a major erosion in its industrial base. The province lost 320,000 manufacturing jobs from 2003 to 2009, and since then has seen no net growth in manufacturing employment. According to Statistics Canada, over the past decade, critical investments in machines and equipment in the manufacturing sector fell by 24% in Ontario, while climbing by 10% in Quebec. When Premier Ford talks about making Ontario open for business, he's talking about this mess. He's talking about not only stopping this slide, but also reversing it. And once again, making Ontario a top-tier destination for job creation, investment, entrepreneurship, and growth. We refuse to accept that our kids will have fewer opportunities than we did. That's why we're getting down to work fast to fix the economy and make it easier to start and grow a business and to invest in Ontario. The previous government brought in a tsunami of new burdens or regulations that have imposed significant unnecessary costs on businesses, and stifled economic growth. The total number of regulatory requirements has grown past an incredible 380,000. In comparison, British Columbia has just over 169,000 regulations, yet no one thinks BC is a terrible place to live in. And far too many of the regulations the previous government imposed on Ontario businesses contain heavy-handed requirements that add paperwork, but not greater protections for people. They're inefficient, inflexible, or out of date, or they duplicate federal or municipal regulations. They also make it expensive, frustrating, and time-consuming for companies to comply with the regulations we do need. And we're paying the price as companies flee south. One business owner who was moving production from Ontario to Ohio likened it to going from a torture chamber to a candy store. We can't let this continue. We must get government out of the way of our job creators. That's why we're not wasting any time lowering business costs to make companies more competitive. Today, our government will introduce the Making Ontario Open for Business Act. This act will reduce the red tape and regulatory burden while looking out for the health and safety of workers. If passed, this legislation will take big steps towards opening Ontario for business. The first of these steps is a repeal of the job-killing parts of Bill 148. Our legislation will remove onerous regulatory burdens for employers while continuing to maintain strong protections for workers. I'll return the podium over in a moment to Minister Scott, who will take you through some of those changes. We're also going to fix regulations that prevent companies from hiring as many skilled trades workers as they need. Tradespeople build our schools, homes, and workplaces. They manufacture and repair our cars and trucks. They maintain the power systems that keep the lights on. But they're in chronic short supply. Employers in sectors such as manufacturing and construction have a tough time recruiting enough skilled tradespeople to expand their businesses. Minister Fulton will take you through how we intend to address this issue. The Making Ontario Open for Business Act, to be tabled this afternoon, is a sign of how serious we are about cutting red tape and opening Ontario for business. We're going to put a stop to this waste, and our government is just getting started. In the years ahead, we'll introduce a series of bills to further lower business costs and boost competitiveness. We'll maintain the rules that are effective and necessary to protect the people of Ontario, while eliminating burdensome and unnecessary regulations that don't clearly contribute to health, safety, and the environment. Our government is getting out of the way of our job creators and making Ontario open for business. Thank you, Mr. Scott.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. I want to begin by thanking my colleagues Minister Wilson and Minister Fullerton for joining me here today, as well as my parliamentary assistant Gila Marteau. Gila has shown invaluable leadership in working with stakeholders across Ontario's economy as we work to create a labour system that protects workers while actually encouraging jobs and growth. For the past 4 months, we've been meeting with businesses, workers, and public sector employees to review Bill 148. As Minister of Labour, I reviewed each section of the bill and asked 3 critical questions. What was the impact on Ontario's economy? Does this provide real benefit for the people? How do we ensure Ontario is open for business? Today, our government will remove onerous burdens on our job creators while preserving real benefits for Ontario workers. This legislation, if passed, will fulfill our commitment to keep Ontario's minimum wage at $14. While some people called for us to roll back the 21% minimum wage hike, we recognize that would be immensely unfair to Ontario workers. As Minister of Labour, I understand there is a need for the minimum wage to increase as the cost of living goes up. As of October 2020, annual increases to minimum wage will be based on an economically sound metric, inflation. Ontario workers and businesses deserve a minimum wage determined by economics, not politics. Our government for the people recognizes that lower income workers and their families do deserve a break, which is why we are committed to ensure minimum wage earners pay no provincial income tax. And Minister Fedeli is actively working on that right now. If you want minimum wage workers to have more money in their pockets, the answer is very simple. Stop taxing them. It's not an answer you'll ever get from the Liberals or the NDP. I use the same deliberate approach to assess each section of Bill 148. Our reforms will correct the Liberals' disastrous personal emergency leave program, a piece of red tape so burdensome it actually incents employers to not hire new workers or create new jobs. Instead, we will introduce a consistent, simple system where every Ontario worker will now have a straightforward package of annual leave days: 3 sick days, 3 family responsibility days, and 2 bereavement days. Every year, every year for every worker. We know time spent with family is important. Our government will protect 3 weeks of paid vacation after 5 years for every Ontario worker. We will continue to support domestic or sexual violence leave. I understand the importance of these provisions. Our government is committed to job-protected domestic or sexual violence leave for all Ontario workers. We will reverse the needless scheduling restrictions and give back employers the flexibility to have the right staff at the right time. Our reforms will protect Ontarians' privacy and personal information. We are repealing the rules that gave unions access to employees' personal information, even if only 20% showed interest in joining a union. We are repealing the rules that forced card-based certification on new sectors. Our reforms give back to those workers the right to a democratic secret ballot. Overall, our reforms will simplify, harmonize, and reduce the regulatory burden for anyone willing to create jobs in Ontario. These reforms we are introducing are deliberate and thoughtful, unlike the last-minute changes imposed on Ontarians through Bill 148. This package of reforms will help unlock the job-creating potential in Ontario's economy, and I am also encouraged to note it will continue to protect and preserve important provisions for current workers, including domestic or sexual violence leave, a minimum of 3 weeks vacation after 5 years of service, and one of the highest minimum wages in Canada, with ongoing increases tied to inflation. Our proposed legislation proves to the world that Ontario is open for business. Businesses should have the confidence in reasonable and predictable regulations, and everyone who works should have the confidence of a good job and a safe workplace. I'd like now to pass things over to Minister Fullerton to conclude. Merle.
Thank you, Laurie, and thank you, Jim. And I also want to thank the staff and stakeholders, including my parliamentary assistant, David Piccini, who have worked tirelessly behind the scenes to get us where we are today. There are many tremendous and vibrant opportunities available in the skilled trades in Ontario. In fact, 1 in 5 jobs in the next 5 years will be trades-related. But there is a problem. Employers can't find apprentices, and apprentices can't find jobs. Yet despite this labour shortage, we have young people who want careers in the skilled trades, who are actually forced to leave this province to find work. They deserve a shot at a job here in Ontario. This is a clear sign that the current Ontario apprenticeship system is broken. With our modern economy, we need an apprenticeship system built for today, one that makes Ontario open for business. I've heard firsthand about the difficulties in the skilled trades, the inability to find jobs, the barriers to entering the trades, and the burdens placed on employers. In Ontario, our ratios are amongst the highest in the country and are a major deterrent for employers looking to hire apprentices. The current ratio regime limits the number of apprentices an employer can train. This makes no sense, especially when employers need apprentices and apprentices need employers. This ultimately limits our growth and the number of jobs available in Ontario. We need to prepare Ontarians for the jobs of today and for the future. Another critical issue is our trade classification system. The current system is complicated and outdated. The classification review process has a direct impact on the labour market and should be used as a tool to strengthen Ontario's economic prosperity and create opportunity for all. Since the Ontario College of Trades began accepting members in 2013, we have continued to hear concerns regarding numerous membership fees, inefficiencies and red tape, obstacles to addressing the skills gap. We can no longer ignore these issues. In response to the issues raised, our government intends to transform and modernize the apprenticeship system, starting by proposing amendments to the Ontario College of Trades and Apprenticeship Act 2009. And if passed, amendments would immediately lower the journey person to apprenticeship ratios to a simple 1-to-1 ratio, making us more competitive with other provinces. We will also establish a moratorium on trades reclassification and deprescribe 24 low-volume trades where apprenticeships are not in demand. Further, if the legislation is passed, we would move towards the repeal of the Ontario College of Trades and Apprenticeship Act 2009, have a mechanism for interim governance structure, and provide for an orderly transition for the wind down of the college to be completed in 2019. Defenders of the College of Trades like to pretend that it has a role in protecting labour standards, but they ignore the fact that Ontario is alone among all provinces in clinging to this kind of model, and the other provinces are doing just fine. As far as we're concerned, if you are prepared to do the work, then you deserve a shot at the job. And that means the status quo has got to be fixed. Well, these are big changes. They are necessary in order to respond to the needs of apprentices, employers, and to address the skills gap and help people reach their full potential. During this time of transition, the government intends to maintain the essential system functions and ensure certainty as we move forward. By reducing the regulatory burden on businesses, apprentices, and journey persons, by closing the skills gap and increasing access to apprenticeship, we are cutting red tape, making Ontario open for business again, creating more better-paying jobs, and making it easier for apprentices to join the workforce. Thank you all.
We'll just ask Jocelyn Bamford from the Coalition of Concerned Manufacturers to give us a perspective from the employer's side.
Thank you, Minister. I want to thank all the ministers for coming today, and I also want to thank Byron and Leland Industries and their amazing team behind them for hosting us today to support jobs in Ontario. I also like to support the other coalition members that took time out of their businesses because this is so important to us. It's important to jobs in the future and the economy and for our kids to have jobs. So thank you to them for coming today. The Coalition of Concerned Manufacturers and Business of Canada supports the Ford's government announcement of reversing the unmanageable parts of Bill 148. The Coalition recognizes the 92% of businesses in this country that are 100 people or less and understands the struggles of supporting both jobs, workers, and the survivability of our companies. Bill 148 was too much too soon and left companies that were already faced with 3 times the electricity rate due to the Green Energy Plan, extra costs from cap and trade, and the challenges of global competitiveness struggling. We are pleased that our employees' personal information will again be safeguarded. Young people just starting out will no longer have to scrape together money for the colleges of trades. Ontario needs to bring back manufacturing and businesses to Ontario. We need to bring back our jobs to Ontario. We need to stem the tide of businesses closing, moving south, moving growth, or closing and selling out to multinational companies. We need to support small and medium-sized businesses, which are the lifeblood of the Canadian economy. We need to be open for business. This legislation will go a long way to maintaining the viability of small to medium businesses in this province and will help us save jobs. Thank you all for coming today.
Right up.
Hi there. Can you explain how the 8 days, are they all paid, the days off for sick leave and bereavement? And will employees have to provide any kind of documentation since they are sort of specifically assigned days off?
So I addressed the proposal of the 8 days. They will be unpaid days, which lines up with the other provinces in Canada. And a medical note will be necessary if asked by the employer. Again, reducing burden for businesses and creating jobs.
Will there be any paid days off for victims of domestic violence?
We will retain in Bill 148, as it was, the provision of leave for sexual and domestic violence. So those 15 days will remain as they were.
Minister Scott, how is eliminating those 2 paid sick days that people have the right to take now and replacing them with unpaid sick days, how is that for the people?
So the best thing we can do for people is to have jobs that are created by businesses. So that's reducing red tape and regulations so we can provide better paying jobs in the province of Ontario. This also lines up with what other provinces across the country have.
Can you name any businesses that shut down operations and moved south of the border because of Bill 148?
I don't want to name, but we do have examples. Jim, I don't know if you want to answer that question.
Well, not by name, but we do know with job losses of 80,000 in the month of August that a number of people obviously lost their jobs. When Bill 148 was first introduced, its first month, we lost 52,000 jobs. Every bank that's done a study in Canada and Ontario tells us that when the scheduling provisions come in, or if they were to come in on January 1st, the worst is yet to come. Tens of thousands more jobs will be lost. You know, the previous government over its 15 years seems to have given up on our industrial base. They've given up on our manufacturing sector. They produce legislation that regulates a minimum wage economy. We want to go beyond that. We want people to have good jobs, like the good jobs the people behind us have. And we need more of these jobs, and we're not giving up. Each day, companies go to Ohio, they go to Michigan, they go to our competitors across the border, and we need to get our house in order in Ontario. And today's the first big step towards reducing red tape, teaming up with our employers and our employees to make sure we create good jobs, away from just focusing on a minimum wage economy. But let's bring back the manufacturing jobs. Let's once again be the economic engine of Canada.
Regarding the 23 compulsory trees in Ontario, so in the future, can you name a couple which don't need a certificate to practice in that tree?
Well, we're looking at deprescribing 24 low-volume trades. Examples would be saddlery, These low-volume trades have very few requests for apprenticeships, and in fact, 0 certificates of qualification have been handed out in 8 years, or very few.
Do you have any specific, could give to us?
Specific which? Sorry, Ms. Scott?
Which trade you are looking at?
For the low volume trades, things like saddlery, building material retailer, that sort of thing. They're very low volume, and there's very few requests for apprenticeships.
We can get the list.
Yeah, and if you want the list, we can get you the list.
The bit about repealing equal pay for equal work, I'm just wondering, how do you justify that to employees who are maybe working part-time and feel that they're doing the same kind of work as a full-time employee?
Well, we found that provision actually was a job killer. We saw numbers that Minister Wilson just referenced of when Bill 148 first came out. 50,000 jobs were lost in January. We again in August saw 80,000 jobs that were, in August 80,000 jobs were lost, predominantly were part-time jobs. So we found that employers were laying part-time workers off the most, and in most cases either working themselves or cutting their hours of business. So again, it's back to the fact there's so much red tape and regulation. It's hard for businesses to prosper. We want a province of better paying jobs, so we're part of cutting red tape and regulation.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.